What's going on? Welcome to Play Fighting. It's SoCal Honey Badger along with my mans.
What's going on, everybody? It's Ryan Stone.
Right? And today we are actually going to discuss like one whole topic for the whole day instead of just covering the news, because the news has been a little light. And this was a topic that we started discussing in text message, and I was like, yeah, we're saving this for the podcast. Tell them what we're covering.
All right. Well, you've seen the thumbnail. Yes, we are asking, was Rob Van Dam held back in the original ECW? Like, when you think about it, that epic run, he had an epic run. It made his career, in my opinion. But he was held back. I think there were things that held him back from being even more.
Well, and see, the whole crux or the whole origin of the discussion is RVD is like DLC for the game. And he put the television title on RVD, and I was like, nah, fuck that. He needs the world, the ECW world title. And I explained to him, and he's like, yeah, but that's the belt that made RVD. And I was like, yeah, that's the belt RVD made. Okay,
I will say that. Yeah, he made it.
He should have had the world belt. The only reason why anyone cared about the TV belt was because he was the one that had it. And so before
I would agree, because I don't think it was as. I don't think the TV title was as epic prior. You had some awesome champions. You had Chris Jericho. You had Too Cold Scorpio. You had some pretty legendary champions.
I think outside
but
of RVD.
I think RVD made the title.
Outside of RVD, really, it was only Taz that made that belt worth a shit. Like, yeah, Chris Jericho.
Eddie had it. Didn't Dean have it?
Yeah, but they had it, like, really. They didn't, like, have runs. It's like Jericho had it for, like, a couple months, did, like, 4 title defenses.
If that.
Yeah, and then, like, that's what it was. It was just kind of flip-flopped around in the mid-card. And they didn't really have any angles or feuds or anything until Taz and Bam Bam Bigelow. And that was all just building to Taz and Bam Bam Bigelow getting world title runs. And then RVD.
I think I don't think Taz ever won the TV title.
No, but it was part of their feud. No,
because he was feuding with Bam Bam. He had the FTW belt.
So it was part of that feud, and like Bam Bam Bigelow having the TV title elevated it, and then when RVD took him, that's when it basically became their main event belt.
Which is crazy. I remember, so we discovered ECW, mid 98, early 98, I want to say.
Nah, it was. Earlier than that. I remember.
No, because the first pay-per-view that I think you ever showed me was WrestlePalooza 98. And then the very next pay-per-view I ended up ordering, which was Heatwave 98.
No, but we were watching it beforehand, because I remember we were at a homie's birthday party. It was like a slumber party. And it was like, and this was before the Raw invasion. And I remember we were like just chilling, watching TV at 4 a.m, because we were, 12 or 13 years old. And ECW came on, and it was RVD versus Sabu. And we were like WWF fans, and we're like, what is this shit, this fake like imitation WWF? Like, this guy calls himself Van Dam. What a fucking poser. Like,
I don't remember this, but it wouldn't shock me if that happened.
You might not have been there at that slumber party. I remember it was Brandon's. I remember you weren't really cool with Brandon a lot. You guys got into a lot of fights. But I remember me and him were ripping on it. Like, this is stupid. This is like imitation. Like, they're like low budget WCW, which was like the worst thing. And then Sabu did a triple jump moonsault off of a fucking chair, and I was like, hold on, this is not low budget WCW.
This is I'm starting to remember this. All right, yes, with Brandon, because he had the black box,
right?
And so he got everything.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember now. Okay.
And it was RVD and Sabu, and we thought it was shitty until we saw them fucking work, and we were like, holy shit, what is this? Like, they just hit him with chairs? Like, that blew our mind. Like, dude, they're not going to disqualify him? And it was like, this is extreme wrestling. And we were like, converted immediately. And when they showed up on Raw, that's when we were like, dude, that's those guys from 4 a.m. Remember, that's the guy that did the chair thing.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. So But we didn't really watch it in between seeing it with Brandon until '98. Okay,
yeah, because
that's where
didn't come on over here. It was that one time. It was like a public access.
Right.
Like they had bought time on a public access channel. It wasn't even like how on ECW was like broadcast, like it came on like Fox or ABC or whatever. Like out here, it was like on like fake ass PBS. Like back in the 90s, they used to have those fucking. But people don't know though. Those like fucking. They're like public broadcast.
The locals. Yeah.
Well, no, but they're not even the locals. They're like the paid channels. Like usually it was just infomercials. Like whoever paid for that time, and it's like what's on this channel. Well, it's 2 hours of ShamWow commercials. Right? And we were flipping through channels, and ECW bought time on one of those channels and played the ECW show, but it was just like one episode. They never played it again. I remember because after that night, I stayed up every night till 4 a.m. for like months because we had this. I lived in the same apartment complex, remember?
Yeah.
And we had the same cable, and I stayed up every night waiting for it. It never came on again. I never saw ECW until they invaded Raw after that.
Yeah, dude. So. Okay, now that's all coming back. Yeah, we had that glimpse of ECW, but we really didn't get back into them until mid '98, early '98.
Right? People don't know how hard it was to get this shit in 1996 or whatever,
Especially on the West Coast, it didn't exist.
Yeah,
like that was the craziest thing. Like there was nothing. We couldn't get anything for ECW. Like I remember discovering WCW in like late '91. And I was like, what is this? Because I remember I discovered WCW after Ric Flair showed up in WWF with the Real World's Championship. I was like, what is that? And then I want to say just a few weeks later discovered WCW. But even it wasn't like we all knew where everything was. Like this was no internet. Come on, this was like I said 91, and then we were catching ECW in like 96. Yeah, no freaking way. I didn't even have a computer at that point.
Well, even back then, like, the territories were still kind of, like, on life support. Like, people think that Vince McMahon showed up in the 80s and the territories disappeared, but they were still kind of on life support in the 90s. Like, we had local indie... Yeah, we had, like, a local indie wrestling that was, like, big in our area, and, like, we had our own little local stars. It wasn't like it would have been in the 70s or the 80s before Vince McMahon, but, like, that's what we watched. Like, it wasn't, like, we didn't get ECW. We had, what was it, like, UPW or some shit, like UWF or something?
I forget. Yeah, we had some weird ones. I know we had the AWA stuff that they taped in Vegas. That was always on an ESPN, early in the mornings or late at nights.
This just shows what kind of fucking wrestling nerds we've always been.
God.
Like,
we would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to watch WCW Worldwide.
Dude, the fact that we are two fucking idiots from California who were able to follow ECW in the 90s during its height, right? Like, it was because of guys like us that they had Heatwave. Because we were buying merch. Remember, we bought shirts. We bought fucking action figures. Like, we couldn't even watch the fucking show, but we were like, fuck, dude, if we buy this merch, they'll start running shows. And then when they would fucking run Heatwave, and it's like, fucking L.A., man. It always goes to L.A.,
I wish I would have gone. That was a show. And, dude, we weren't even out of high school at that point. My parents weren't letting me go to L.A. It wasn't happening.
Right.
Especially in that legendary of a venue, the Grand Olympic. Dude, I wish.
Dude, we were literally like a couple hours away from Hayabusa's like only American fucking match.
Dude, yeah, that happened at
because that was Heatwave '98.
Well, that was in Ohio.
Oh no, Heatwave '98.
No, Heatwave 2000 was the one that was in LA.
Yeah,
that was Heatwave 2000. But yeah, Hayabusa wrestled at I want to say it was like the E3 Expo one year. It was random, but yeah, man, like it was tough getting a hold of ECW. I remember when the action figures finally showed up in our local Toys R Us and Walmarts, and dude, we grabbed whatever we could. If we found an ECW tape at Suncoast Video, we were grabbing it. We tried to get our hands on as much ECW as we could because we couldn't see it.
Yeah.
All we ever got were the pay-per-views.
And dude, those fucking tapes were like fucking treasures. It was like, yo, dude, hey, I need my Best of Dudley's back. Hey, I know you watched that shit. 3 times this weekend. I need my Best of Dudley's back. And it's like, all right, but I need I need barely legal back then.
Yep.
Like,
Dude, that was
the tape trading
ECW was
back
so
then.
hard to get a hold of. Like, I wish it was as easy as it was today. Like, dude, people today have no clue how hard it was just to watch wrestling that you want to watch. It's not local. Like, I didn't get into the tape trading stuff, but like,
Yeah,
man,
because
I
remember,
wish I had.
no, dude, because I used to fucking get tapes from Mark. Remember that fucking crackhead dude who thought he was Buff Bagwell? And, like, he would
Yes.
get the fucking tapes. That's how I got the ECW shit. That's how I got to
Yes.
see the New Japan shit. And so he was doing the tape trading for me. He'd trade tapes, and I just borrowed them and then, like, loaned them out to you. We weren't so much tape traders as tape takers.
And we would dub them so we would keep a copy.
Right? Right? ECW in the 90s was magical, and even though we didn't
so
actually
great.
get to be a part of it, it's still kind of crazy that we were in our own little way. Like, we never got to make it to the shows, but it was guys like us that were just blindly buying this shit. Just like, what? They fucking made this has Sabu on the cover? I'm fucking buying it. What is it, a magazine? Yeah, I want that.
Dude, yeah, Wow Magazine. Dude, we had subscriptions to ECW Magazine. Like, we watched it 6 times a year at most, and we had everything that we could find.
Right?
Dude, it was different. You know, when we were catching all that stuff, we were, what, 15? 14, 15? That was, 97, 98 was like 14, 15 for us. And, like, we were growing out of the cartoon eras of stuff. So it was seeing ECW as a more hardcore promotion. It was like, oh, I'm into that. I'm way into that.
Well, not
I remember like when we were like, dude, wait, there's no rules.
Right?
Wait, flaming fucking tables? Like, we were geeked out. That wasn't what we got to see. We never saw that shit watching WWF and WCW.
Yeah, you put on
Never.
WWF and you got Doink the Clown versus Tatanka, and then you turn on ECW and you had RVD versus Balls Mahoney covered in blood jumping off balconies, and you're like, what the fuck? I didn't even know that wrestling could do this.
Right? It just blew our little minds at the time. And I mean, even to this day, I'm a massive ECW fan. I recently came across an online store called 2800 Studio, and if you don't know about them, check them out on social media and 2800studio.com. They're not a sponsor. I'm just a fan.
Yeah, fuck
and
you.
they post some.
They better pay us for that.
But they post some pretty cool ECW related merchandise that you could purchase, and there's things I've been wanting since the late 90s that I never got, that now I finally have, and I'm still buying ECW stuff when I find it, because dude, it's so awesome. Like, I just looked to my right and I have a Bam Bam Bigelow, and and it's an action figure. It's one of his Legends action figures, but it has the ECW TV title. I got a Cactus Jack that came with the tag team titles. Like, I still buy anything ECW related just because I'm still such a big fan of it.
Yeah, it changed the world, and specifically because of guys like Rob Van Dam.
Right.
Right. So let's just go into where it started.
All right.
Well, you have the notes up. You do.
So we're going to go ahead and go into a little bit of history on RVD within ECW, and then we're going to get into our thoughts about him being held back. So to start, he came into ECW in 1996, and one of his first feuds was against Sabu. And I think that was one of the first matches we watched was their stretcher match.
That was it, because they did take him out on a stretcher.
Yeah. And I remember that RVD Sabu feud was just phenomenal. But then when they started I did not know that. We didn't watch a whole lot of that feud, the one-on-one stuff, when it was happening live. We more saw them after they became a tag team. And they became a tag team, I want to say it was around end of 96 from what I was reading. They teamed up, but they always had that like contentious relationship over it. I just remember them always bickering. Dude, and I loved having Bill Alfonso. Dude, Fonzie was the man. My pro wrestling loot box just came this week, and I got a Bill Alfonso t-shirt. I'm pretty stoked about that. But yeah, I love the dynamic that Sabu and RVD had, where they're constantly bickering with each other, but yet they worked together when they needed to.
Right. And it's like looking at some of their matches as a tag team, and it's like, dude, they took on Furnace and LaFawn. They took on the Eliminators. Like, dude, these are legendary fucking matches, right? To just think, like, yo, dude, Sabu and RVD versus the Eliminators was the undercard in ECW.
How crazy is that? And that was probably one of the best matches of the night.
Right? Right, and even Furnace and LaFawn, a lot of people don't really give them credit because they kind of had a middling run in WWF. But I always thought they were really cool. And Furnace and LaFawn, to me, was the first exposure I had to WWF dropping the ball on indie darlings. Because I remember hearing about them a lot in like the, you know, in the magazines and just throughout the wrestling industry. And then when they came to WWF, like they just kind of like jobbed out to the smoking guns. And it's like these guys were supposed to be dope dudes on the indies, and they just lose to the smoking guns. And then they left and went to WCW and did a little bit more in WCW. But that was my first like, wow, like they didn't live up to the hype that they got on the indie scene. And as a kid, I was just like, I guess they weren't all that. Later, I realized, like, yo, WWF fucking dropped the ball, because you go back and watch their matches, and you're like, dude, Furnace and LaFawn were tight.
I remember watching them with you, and we were fans of Furnace and LaFawn. They were treated like crap, but we were like, oh, these guys are cool. But it's because I think at that point, you and I had been in the, like you said, the magazines and such. But yeah, dude, I need to go back and watch some more of that stuff with Furnace and LaFawn, the Eliminators. That seems like a lot of fun times, but it's so hard watching that stuff on Peacock. I hate the overdubbed music.
Oh, yeah.
That's so difficult for me. But here's something that's interesting with RVD. It was probably one of the first controversies of him being possibly held back. And it happened at their very first pay-per-view when ECW had Barely Legal in May of '97. So the match was supposed to be Chris Candido versus Lance Storm, but Chris Candido got hurt, and as a last-minute replacement, RVD came in. I'll tell you that I don't remember much of the match except for probably one of the worst chair shots in history. Like, I think that was at a time where like Lance Storm was like really afraid of hitting people.
Yeah. Yeah, and hearing like, you know, RVD, you know, cut that promo and all that, and seeing Paul Heyman's responses afterwards, and it's just like, it's kind of mind-boggling that it started all the way back then.
Right. So in RVD's promos, he had said something about he was upset that he was a backup plan. He wasn't even supposed to be on the card. And so he was a backup, and in RVD's words on the show was, some guy who couldn't even lace my boots.
Which that stings, because I'm a Candido fan, and it's like, it's like Candido's good, but yeah, he can't lace RVD's boots. That's fuck, man. That one's hard. It's hard because I liked Candido, but I can't deny that, dude. Very few people are RVD's. Very few people could lace RVD's boots ever.
Oh no, he's going to go down as probably one of the more unique styles of wrestling ever. I mean, as Rey Mysterio revolutionized a cruiserweight style, I think RVD revolutionized a faster-paced style for the larger guys. Because he was, what, 230, 240? I mean, guys weren't working like him at that size.
Yeah, he was really one of the first heavyweights to show, like... And he wasn't like a super... Like, he was maybe smaller than Bret Hart, I think. He wasn't that big, but you expected his shit out of Shawn Michaels. You didn't expect that out of a guy built like RVD.
Right. But so what's interesting, and I liked hearing what Paul Heyman said, because it's a very interesting fact. I get what he meant. So Paul Heyman said, I needed that first pay-per-view to be very ECW branded. And I didn't know how long RVD was going to be going to be associated with ECW. Very interesting.
That's the start, dude, and that's the theme this is going to be a recurring theme. Paul Heyman knew what he had with RVD, and I think the real issue is that Paul Heyman is such a scumbag that he just assumes everyone's a scumbag, and he never trusted RVD, and RVD is not a scumbag. He really just liked being at ECW, and Paul Heyman couldn't get through his mind that someone wasn't going to backstab him over greed. And now, RVD was not that guy. The only reason why he stayed in ECW is because he fucking loved it. And as long as Paul was paying him enough, because once Paul stopped paying him, that's when RVD, that's when we'll get to that. But
right. So this whole barely legal thing, I guess that was, like you said, that was probably the first point of contention between the two. But that was also related to, because to promote barely legal, they were invading WWF Monday Night Raw. And during that whole invasion angle, RVD, or Jerry Lawler, I should say, aligned himself with RVD and Sabu and started calling Rob the Mr. Monday Night. And it's very, so like, think about this. Leading up to the barely legal pay-per-view, you've got a WWF guy who is telling one of your guys, you should be up here. You are Mr. Monday Night. Shouldn't be in the bingo halls. And you got RVD cutting promos on Raw saying, I'm too big for ECW. I deserve to be showcased at one of the big two, referencing WWF and WCW. I could understand Paul's resentment a little bit, because you probably saw it when they were backstage or doing whatever they could at those Monday Night Raws where they were at.
He worked himself into his shoot, because all of this could have been resolved with Paul Heyman just talking to RVD and trusting in his employee. Hell yeah, Jerry Lawler was trying to recruit him. Hell the fuck yeah, WWF was throwing everything they had at RVD at the time. We all know this. There's no secret they were trying to get him. And he didn't want to go. He was happy in ECW. And Paul Heyman could have realized that if he would have just either talked to RVD, or if he did talk to him, trust and believe him. Because again, like at this point, RVD was getting courted and he wasn't making those moves. Yeah, he was kind of playing along with the angle. But like, I mean, if he wanted to go, he could have went at any time. And he didn't.
So I don't know what his contract status was with ECW. I don't know how legitimate those contracts were. Were they just handshakes? Were they signed agreements? I know later on they got definitely more legal. When you think about the Mike Awesome stuff, where he showed up on WCW, but he was the ECW World Champion, and all that type of junk. And very interesting. And we'll get to discussing more of this type of stuff as we get on. So, he, after the whole barely legal, after the ECW invasion of WWF, he's back just doing ECW, but he's still calling himself Mr. Monday Night. It's funny how, even though he technically betrayed ECW, he was just as over with the fans as he was before. Because maybe even more popular now.
The ECW fan base, even though they were rabid for ECW, they'd still shit on ECW. Like, if Paul Heyman cut a corny promo, they'd fucking laugh his ass out of the building. But the thing about the ECW faithful is that it's one of the few instances where it was a true meritocracy. Like, RVD got over because he legit was just better than everybody else.
Right.
Like, hands down, you look at their roster, and it's like, at the time when RVD was at his height, like, very few people could go with him. That's why they kept booking him with the same guys: Sabu, Jerry Lynn, Taz, Bam Bam Bigelow. Because, like, you were just not going to get other guys to go to his level. And, yeah, RVD, he was too much. He was too good.
Well, and so that, him being that good, him getting that over with the crowd, I mean, he wins the ECW TV title off of Bam Bam Bigelow in 1998, April 4th. And this is where I really started paying attention to the Sabu and RVD relationship, because it was that win that kind of pissed Sabu off, because Sabu was also going for the TV title, and he actually helped RVD win. I think I'm trying to remember if it was a triple threat or not, but I remember Sabu on all fours, Van Daminator to Bam Bam. Bam Bam falls over Sabu. RVD jumps over and pins him 1, 2, 3. And that's how he won the TV title. I remember Sabu being pissed, but they still teamed up. Hell, they went and won the tag team titles 2 months later, and RVD's running around with 2 straps. And I think
that was such a good time. Those.
Dude, I loved when he would do the entrances and be pointing at the titles. His intros were always my favorite too. Sabu or Sandman always will have the best entrance, but RVD, I really enjoyed his when he had the belts.
I just loved it, like how they would have to matches for the TV title, and it was the tag champs fighting over the TV title, and how
Right?
like even in mid match, right? Like during the match, RVD would do his dumbass RVD shit where he'd start posing in the middle of the match, like Sabu's
Yep.
in the ring fighting, and RVD starts posing with the TV belt, and then Sabu runs in and snatches the TV belt and tags RVD in, and then starts posing with the TV belt. Like they did so much cool shit during this era. RVD
It
and
was
Sabu,
so much fun.
this tag team run, man. I mean, the Hardy Boys literally took all of RVD and Sabu's
Yep.
shit, put that on WWF, and became legends.
Yup. Yeah, dude. I mean, Jeff Hardy's what do they call it? Not Whisper in the Wind, with the one where he jumps off Matt's back. Yep, that came straight from RVD and Sabu.
Or even just the fucking split-legged leg drop that Jeff Hardy does. RVD started that. Sabu did that. Like they stole a lot of spots from RVD and Sabu, and it was funny watching, especially during this time period when RVD and Sabu were tagging regularly, and you would just see something on an ECW show, and then literally the Hardys and Edge and Christian would do that on Monday Night Raw like the next week, and you're like, wow, they watch ECW as well.
I'm trying to remember what pay-per-view it was, but I remember a move happening, and and Joey Styles just going, "Well, you'll see that on Monday night."
Right?
And it happened all the time. I mean, well, that's what happens when you're on the cusp. People got to catch up to you, and they're going to steal from you to catch up.
I mean, it's kind of like Seth Rollins stealing Okada's moves
Sure.
nowadays, you know? But, like, it was really cool to see it back then because people weren't familiar. You know, people, like, nowadays when Seth Rollins does Okada's little, well, he does the knee, right?
He does the knee, but still, that's where
ripcord knee.
he took it from Kenny and Okada, because Kenny did it first. Kenny did it to Okada.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, when he does the ripcord, like people are familiar with Okada now. I mean, the
Right.
WWE fan base is pretty like they're pretty insular. They don't really watch stuff outside of WWE, but they're more in tune. Like they know what Okada is, even though they don't watch New Japan. They know that it exists. Whereas back then, WWF fans had no idea what a ECW was. So when Jeff Hardy and Matt Hardy would do RVD and Sabu spots on TV, and like the WWF fan base, you know, we'd go back to the lunchroom at high school the next day, and did you see that move from Jeff Hardy? And it was always me and you in the back, like, fuck, dude, that shit's whack, man. Jeff Hardy's lame. The RVD and Sabu did that shit months ago. Like, and people just had no idea, right? There was no way.
The wrestling nerds. They were just wrestling fans.
But see, it's not like today where, you know, nowadays you could say, well, Seth Rollins is a fraud. Look, he stole it from Kenny Omega, and then pull it up on YouTube. There was no way. It was like we were talking about some mythical tag team that no one would. Dude, you have no idea. There's these guys in New York, man, and they do the flips and shit, and Jeff Hardy and Matt just steal all their moves, but they're so dope. If you only seen them, man, you gotta believe me, it's real. Back then, whether or not RVD Sabu existed was a debate in wrestling.
Yeah, because those fans probably weren't there during the time of the invasion when we were watching. They probably came in after Stone Cold hit it big, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're wrestling fans now."
Right?
Ain't wrestling fans, you fair weather motherfuckers. You ain't even fans now.
Fucking marks.
But continuing on, you know, so RVD, that television title run, and this is where we're going to get into that record run. So yeah, I know he held the tag titles a couple times with Sabu. They dropped him for the second time in April of '99, and then RVD was just mainly on television title defenses. But he held that title from April of '98 until January of 2000. Like, that is a legendary run. But at that time,
a glorified indie. Like ECW wasn't really a national, like he had already lost the TV title by the time they got on TNN. Like he was barely the TV champion on because remember he got hurt and they put the belt on Jerry Lynn right around the time they first, like it was like a month into their deal with TNN and RVD got hurt. So like he had this legendary run in a glorified indie, and if you don't follow indies, like they swap titles every other show.
Sometimes, yeah.
So, like, for
Yeah.
somebody to hold it that long, like, WWF and WCW didn't even have title runs that long. Even
Nope.
now, like, who else has had a title run even close that what? Like, Punk had
Roman.
his and Roman.
Basically.
AEW hasn't even had a champion hold a belt longer than a year. And RVD, we're talking the semi-modern era, okay? We're talking in the televised era. Okay, Bruno Sammartino had a 10-year run back when they had one show a fucking year and it was never on TV. That doesn't count. RVD had a 2-year run on the indie scene without TV, just doing house shows, 3 house shows every weekend.
Yeah, so he got hurt in January of 2000. I want to say their TNN deal was in the fall of 99. Like, he may have had 1 or 2 matches on there and gone. That sucks, you know? But like that run was massive. Like, I remember, to me, and that RVD was one of the reasons we were watching. And to me, that, and probably the main reason we were watching. I know he was one of my favorites at that time. But he was the secondary champion. He was not main eventing pay-per-views, not defending the TV title.
But see, that's the thing and that's the difference between like RVD and a lot of modern wrestlers, and you see this a lot with a lot of title reigns. RVD went out of his way to make that title feel special and to feel more important than the world title. He actually saw it as a competition. And you don't see that a lot to where the mid-card act, and you can't in WWE. They don't give you the freedom to get over.
No.
But, like, you don't see that too much in, like, any other promotion where the mid-card act is like, nah, fuck the world champ. I'm going to be more over. You don't see that in New Japan. AAA, they don't care about belts. You don't see that in, like, Impact. You did see it during, like, AJ Styles' run in the X Division. They were kind of sort of be inspired by RVD's run.
Right.
You could tell it had that RVD aftertaste, but no one's been able to have a legendary run with a mid-card belt and make that the main event belt. And it was because RVD like took ownership. He was like, dude, he even wouldn't, there's stories of how he wouldn't even update the TV title to the new belt because they made it silver. And he's like, nah, I don't walk with the silver belt. I walk with the gold one.
Yeah, dude, and I'll be honest, I was a little bummed when they went from their Winged Eagle television to the one that they ended up with. While I do love the final TV belt, that belt, the Winged Eagle one, maybe because the Winged Eagle design is probably my favorite belt design of all time. That's why that belt is better to me. But that TV title, their one that they finished with, I thought their belts were fantastic at the end.
Yeah, but it was silver, and
okay.
RVD was like, yo, I'm not rocking the silver belt. Yeah, and it wasn't even that. Like, he carried himself like an unbeatable champion. Like, at that time, when RVD had a match, it was like, dude, Sabu is Sabu, but I don't think he could beat RVD. Like, Jerry Lynn, it was like, man, Jerry Lynn's feud with RVD at that time, that was our Kenny Omega and Okada. Except Jerry Lynn never actually got the belt. That was the thing, is they gave it to Kenny Omega. But Jerry never got it.
Yeah, Jerry got the world title, but he never got, I don't think he ever got the TV, especially not off of RVD.
No, he did get the TV title. He just never got it from RVD. Because
go ahead.
He won it at that show that RVD was, they had like a vacated match, and he won it. And RVD, it was right when RVD got hurt.
Okay, I don't remember what the whole title lineage was after RVD got hurt.
Yeah, because everybody stopped paying attention. It was like, who's the TV champ? Like, Supernova?
Look,
all right, whatever.
But, like, look at that. That's what says something about that title. And I think RVD made that belt what it was because of how good he was in the ring. You know, yeah, it was his dedication and wanting to have great matches, but like those matches and how he was wrestling was it. But look at card placement. He wasn't the main event, but he was having some of the best matches. Hell, the first ever episode of ECW on TNN was a replay of Jerry Lynn and RVD from Hardcore Heaven.
Right? You know, I remember that. They didn't even show an actual match. It was like, yo, dude, if you want to know what ECW is about, because that was the match. If you were an ECW fan and you wanted to convert, you were like, dude, watch this shit. RVD.
You had to watch RVD and Jerry Lynn.
That was the one. It was like, here, just watch this shit. And then they're like, yo, I want more of that. I don't even know what wrestling is, but I want more of that.
But probably within the last 2 years, I went back and I showed my wife that match. But what I did was I said, I have the original copy. So we're going to watch the original entrance with the original music as it was intended. And then we'll go to Peacock because they've upscaled it and it looks better. And we'll watch the match from there. But I made her watch the entrances from like a tape from, 1999.
Oh man. Yeah,
but then we got to the entrance. Then we watched
Rock.
on Peacock or on the network, whatever it was at the time.
Dude, RVD's entrance doesn't hit
walk.
without walk. It doesn't hit without Pantera. Like seeing the crowd time the chorus with the RVD thumb points and like how he would have the whole crowd rocking out to Pantera. Because as soon as you heard that riff, right, when you heard that riff, you were like, oh, somebody's fucked, dude. RVD is coming out. There were very few theme songs in ECW that instantly got the crowd popping. It was Sandman, Tommy Dreamer, New Jack, RVD. That was it. Those songs.
Sabu.
Not even. Sabu didn't give people stand in the way. Man in a Box or Enter Sandman. Right?
Okay.
Because those guys used actual like pop music, right? Like Sabu just had a generic wrestling theme that became iconic because it was Sabu. But like New Jack was using Ice Cube, so people that didn't know, RVD used Pantera. So people that didn't know wrestling, they knew Pantera. They knew Ice Cube. They knew Metallica. So it's like, okay, everybody else had some generic wrestling song, but this guy has Pantera. So like, there's something up with that guy. And RVD's entrance, like I agree with you. Under Sandman, RVD was next.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, absolutely. That entrance is iconic. Like, dude. I still remember like at Heatwave 2000, there was a guy that made a sign that had pulley strings, and it would do the thumb point, and the legs would kick out. Dude, and come on, the RV and then the spinning kick on the D. Come on, dude. Right. Dude was phenomenal. But getting back to his history, so all right. January 29, broke his ankle, got to forfeit the TV title. He is 3 months shy, little shy of actually just over 2 months shy.
He got
of
being punked.
Of having that title for 2 years.
Dang, he got CM Punk. CM Punk couldn't have it for 2 weeks.
So he comes back, and this is where I kind of go sideways with the booking. Dude, he comes back. He starts feuding with Scotty fucking Riggs, or Scotty Anton as his name was there. And I'm like, why? This was your television champion. Put him in the main event. Put him in the world title picture. No, he feuds with Scotty Anton. After Scotty Anton, he goes to fucking feud with Rhino to get revenge over his injury. Rhino is eventually the television champion, but RVD never takes it off him. Why is RVD going after the goddamn TV title at this time? Should have been the world title at this time.
Yeah,
you already fucked it up by taking way too long getting him that world title shot. Then he gets hurt, and now he comes back and you're still not doing it? Like, and the shitty part was, he wasn't even in the company long after he came back. He fucking leaves because he is owed pay by Heyman, but Heyman hasn't paid him, so he doesn't start showing up to shows. He finally shows up at Guilty as Charged in 2001. Oh, it's the last pay-per-view.
Right?
Like,
and the thing is, they had him stuck, like, because RVD, he was the Kenny Omega of our generation. Like, if RVD was coming out, it was 5-star match. I don't care what fucking Meltzer, like, what he says. Like, RVD was a draw because every time he came out, you knew it was going to be the dopest match of the fucking night. Like, hands down, no discussion.
Hands down.
Okay, ECW, RVD was going to give you the match of the year every card he was on. It didn't matter. Dude, they put him in there with fucking Axl Rotten, and it was the dopest Axl Rotten match you've ever seen.
That's a great way to put how he was looked at. The Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega came out and was the best bout machine. And that was RVD. That was RVD. He was coming out having the best matches.
With anybody
so why
and everybody.
give him the fucking belt? Like, that's what doesn't make sense to me. Where was he should have, when he came back, they should have just rocket strapped and put the fucking world title on him right to the moon. Fucking Scotty Anton? Come on.
I liked Scotty Riggs. But
I didn't mind Scotty Riggs. I mean, he might have given you the clap, but I don't know. Bring him into ECW, sure. But Come on, give me RVD in a world title match.
I think what they were trying to do was, because this is when the darkest days of ECW. This is towards the
It
fall.
was.
And Heyman was losing stars left and right, and he knew that RVD was probably going to go to WWF sooner or later. He was probably not going to stick around just because the writing was on the wall, right? People weren't being paid. And Paul Heyman, I think, was just desperate to try and build new draws and new stars. Because they were putting, like, Amish Roadkill and Danny Doring versus, Supernova and Chet Chetty. And, like, that was
Chetty.
like, Chris Chetty. Like,
Taz's nephew? Cousin?
I think it was his cousin. But, like, that would be a main event. You know, like, they were hurting towards the end of ECW where it's like the main event is Rhino versus Just Incredible. When has that ever been a draw? You know? And,
but that's my point is they had Rob Van Dam.
They were desperate. It was like, dude, we've got to build these guys up. Like, we're going to lose Rob Van Dam. We need somebody. What we have right now is we got Scotty Anton and we have fucking Intergalactic Planetary, and what are we going to do with that?
Yeah, but you look at it. He comes back in May of 2000. So, all right. Well, here's a couple. Let me just start off with a rumor. So there was a rumor going around that towards RVD's 2-year mark, he was going to get a title versus title match for the world title, and I think the champion at the time was Mike Awesome. So they were going to put.
And that was if he didn't get hurt. If he didn't get hurt, that was the plan.
That was the plan, that if he didn't get hurt, he was going to be a dual champion again with the world and television title. Now this would have been like mid-2000. You're still less than a year out of shutting down. But here's the thing. So he got hurt in January and returned in May of 2000 at that Hardcore Heaven. Okay, so you had Hardcore Heaven in May, then you got Heatwave in July, August. Why not give him the world title at Heatwave?
I see. The thing is, I don't think you understand how quickly, or the listeners understand how quickly this shit all went down. Like, okay, they get the deal on TNN, and they start with RVD versus Jerry Lynn, a replay. Their debut show wasn't even new shit. It was like a replay of our old shit, right? They were strapping the Rocket to RVD. They were going to make him a dual champ, and then he got hurt. And I think what happened was Paul Heyman banked everything on RVD, and when RVD got hurt, everything fell apart. Like, he built ECW around RVD being the draw and the star, and when he got hurt, and it's like, shit, we're doing TV, and we don't have our biggest star, and things kind of fell from there because, dude, the hype around ECW was RVD and Sabu. Because everybody else that was worth a shit had already gone to WWE. Like, the last episode, or the first episode of TNN was the Dudleys' last show in ECW.
Yeah.
So they lost everybody. RVD was all
and Taz left like a month later.
Yeah, like RVD was all they had. And so when he got hurt, it was like, dude, they had no draws. And without draws, you can't make money. And so when RVD came back, he came back to a company that was basically dead in his absence.
So look at this. So when RVD won the television title was 1998, April of 98. Shane Douglas was the world champion at the time. And he was hurt. He was out for months. Didn't have to relinquish that title. Very weird that RVD did for being gone for 3 months.
Well, because they were trying to build the Taz. They wanted Shane Douglas to put over Taz.
I know.
But
that didn't happen until January of 99.
But what are you going to do? Are you going to have a transitional champ? No, they kept the belt on Shane Douglas, and then he got hurt. And then when he came back, they had to put heat back on him to get the belt, to get him as a hot champion leading into Taz. But that was
why not do that to Rob?
Because then you'd
why
be
didn't
feeding
Rob get that
tag.
same treatment?
Because you didn't want a transitional champ. They wanted to build
No. I'm talking about when Rob came back from injury. If the plan was to make him dual champion mid 2000, why would you not do that? But instead, in 97, 98,
because
you had Shane Douglas was on the shelf. Shane Douglas kept the title, and yeah, he did commentary and he did some stuff here and there. But he was hurt. But it was all to the build to that Taz feud.
But this wasn't in a vacuum, dude. We're talking when RVD came back, right? Paul Heyman had already not been paying him for months, Okay, so RVD is coming back as a charity run, and he's probably not even getting paid now. He's coming back as a favor for Paul Heyman, who just had Mike Awesome bring his fucking title to WCW. So, like, look at it from Paul Heyman's perspective. This guy's showing up, and I cannot pay him. It's not even that I won't pay him or I don't want to. I cannot pay him. Business has been bad. I cannot pay him, and the last guy I put my belt on that I couldn't pay took it to the other TV show.
But it wasn't, that wasn't the case with Mike Awesome. Mike Awesome was just a case of he didn't have a signed contract. They were working on a handshake deal.
Which is
and
what he had
WCW
with
showed up and
RVD.
stole him. I hear you. But here's a guy who could have left in, 97? Still there.
And that's
holds
the
the
point
title
I'm making.
all of 98, 99, gets hurt in early 2000, comes back, and you don't want to give it to him because he might leave. Here was a guy who had all the potential in the world in 97, 98, and a ton of national television exposure from Monday Night Raw. He still didn't leave you. Yes, you're not paying him, Rob. If I can't pay you, here's what I would like to do, because I need you. This was one of the things I wrote down in my notes. Do you think, had Rob been made world champion, that the draws would have been different for the house for the houses? Do you think they would have made more money?
Not at all. Here's the deal. Paul Heyman has been very clear about what killed ECW, and it was the lack of distribution. Okay,
sure.
And Tommy Dreamer. Tommy Dreamer, he seconds that. He's like, yeah, that's what killed us. Was like, our shows were still drawing crowds. We were still making money. We were behind, but it was because we were behind on paying people because the distributors were refusing payment. So that's why the
Viewers'
wrestlers
Choice wasn't paying them.
So the wrestlers weren't getting paid, so that's why the wrestlers weren't showing up. So, like, you look at the perspective of Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman knew the writing was on the wall. They couldn't get the distribution. They weren't going to get the distribution, and so he went to WWE. And
I see Paul's point. Like, I get it. I get why. I get the whole closure. But you had a guy who showed he had commitment to you. Yeah, was he your Tommy Dreamer? No, he wasn't your Tommy Dreamer. Tommy Dreamer was there with you to the thick and the thin. Yes, RVD could have bounced. But even look at this. Instead of going to WWF, what did RVD do when he had money issues? He stayed home.
Yeah.
He didn't show up on Nitro. He didn't show up on Raw. He stayed home. This guy, I don't think RVD was the type of guy to fuck you over.
No, because he loved ECW. The whole ECW revival was his idea. He loved this. Like he
loved it. So why not give them that? Why not have that talk and give him that strap?
That's what I'm saying, dude. The whole problem is Paul Heyman didn't trust Rob Van Dam.
Right.
If he would have,
it's bullshit.
Because here's the deal. I don't think things would have changed if RVD had gotten the belt when he came back. It was already too late. I think the real turning point was RVD getting hurt when they needed him most. Because if he didn't get hurt and they strapped the rocket ship to him, RVD was a draw in WWF and they held him back. Imagine that guy being the focus of an upstart rebellious company that caters to edgy teenagers. Like, RVD would have been a megastar and ECW would have rode that wave, and all of their problems, all of their financial issues would have been gone. RVD is a once-in-a-lifetime superstar that can make that happen.
I give you that.
And so if RVD didn't get hurt, and they put the rocket ship on him, the hype, people I bet the only reason why they got the TNN deal was because of RVD. Because that's how hyped he was. RVD, I can't stress to people enough, he was the Kenny Omega of his era.
Yeah.
Like, the only reason why
he was a game changer.
Like, the only reason why people started watching New Japan was because of Kenny Omega and the Bullet Club. And the only reason why AEW even had the running start it did was because Kenny Omega was there. And that's Rob Van Dam to ECW. He was their Kenny Omega, and thankfully AEW got to put their belt on their Kenny Omega, and he had a glorious, legendary run, but they could never do that because they wanted... Paul Heyman's all about the build, dude. He's old school, right? The reason why they didn't have a transitional champ when Shane Douglas was hurt was because the angle they were building to was putting the belt on Taz taking out the triple threat. Have to have Shane Douglas for that. We don't want a transitional champion that fucks up the angle, right? That's why they sat on that, and they booked long term. Paul Heyman was trying to book long term, and Tony Khan tries to do that now with AEW. What do they book this fucking whole CM Punk comeback? They finally put the belt on him. He gets hurt. This is literally what happened with ECW, and it's the same injury, broken foot too.
But look at this. Okay, so Douglas won the title in November of 97, dropped it to Taz in January of 99, who then dropped it to Mike Awesome in September of 99, who dropped it to Masato Tanaka in December of 99, and Mike Awesome won it back also in December of 99, like 5 days later, who then dropped it to Taz after he had shown up in WCW, and they did that whole thing where Taz shows up, WWF contracted wrestler, WCW contracted wrestler, in an ECW ring for the ECW World Title.
Well, see, I think that whole
But think about that. Those were the champions during RVD's legendary almost 2-year television title run. Okay, fine. Taz dropped it to Mike Awesome in September of 99. RVD wasn't hurt then. Why wait till that 2-year point? Why? That was the issue that I had, was why wait till that 2? I get your point. Paul was old school. He wanted that. I bet you could have put the title on him in 99. You would have had the same effect whether you waited 6 more months to put it on him.
Well, I think the thing is that they wanted to build up to the Mike Awesome unification, and they were building up a monster. Like, you look at Mike
But
Awesome,
you could have done that with Taz.
They could have, but they didn't want to do that with Taz. They didn't want
I
to
don't know
Taz,
why.
Because your money matches with Taz and RVD are down the line. If Taz loses the belt to RVD...
This was gone. That was the reason Mike Awesome won that title, was because Taz signed with WWF. Yeah. That was the triple threat match at Anarchy Rules, where it was Mike Awesome, Masato Tanaka, and Taz in a triple threat match, or a 3-way dance, because there is a difference. And that was where you had to pin both people to win the match.
And they eliminated
Taz was the first. Right. Why couldn't you have had RVD in that match instead of Taz and Masato Tanaka? You know, yes, you had the built-in Masato Tanaka Mike Awesome feud after that. But RVD was your television champion. Why couldn't you have had that unification between Taz and RVD? Holy shit! Now Taz leaves, but RVD is finally crowned the champion, and he's the double champion. Fuck, go have him feud with Mike Awesome. Go have him wrestle Masato Tanaka.
I think it's just the old school thing in that because Taz is leaving, they wanted to fucking put the belt on a transitional champ. I still like, because Mike Awesome and Masato Tanaka were transitional champs.
They were.
To get the belt on RVD. And I think it was just that they wanted, like, Paul Heyman wanted to fucking... First of all, they had already done Taz versus RVD. Right, so that's not even a new match.
Years prior, it hadn't been done probably since like '96, maybe '97.
But
that was when Bill Alfonso turned on Taz and joined solely with RVD and 7.
But see, the thing is, why build up this hype title match between Taz, who's leaving, and make him look like a big star on his way out, when we can have him take the belt off him, put it on Mike Awesome, build up Mike Awesome, who's getting over. People are loving him. The guy's got talent. I mean, you know, for what he did in ECW, the fans loved it. He couldn't get over anywhere else. But, you know, put the belt on Mike Awesome, have a big monster heel that RVD can destroy. Because RVD's best feud before getting the TV title was fucking Bam Bam Bigelow, right? RVD worked really good fighting giants. So
he did. But I see, in hindsight, it's always going to be 2020. You know, you could look at it because, I
just think that money match between RVD and an unstoppable Mike Awesome would have been a bigger money match than RVD versus Taz, who was leaving. Because they could have set up rematches, they could have set up programs, they could have set up feuds. It's like RVD beats Taz, okay, Taz leaves. Now what? RVD's the champ. It's a Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold situation. You know, like that
right.
that kind of soured Stone Cold's initial title run because Shawn Michaels just left afterwards, and it was like, okay, well, we're just gonna quickly throw him in a feud with the Undertaker, you know. And do you want to do that for your new champion? Not really. Like, you want to get some juice out of this initial feud. So I see why they didn't do it, and I kind of side with Paul because an RVD at that point versus Mike Awesome, who was hot at that time. Okay, people forget the 70s, the fat chick, all that. Mike Awesome in ECW was fucking hot. Mike Awesome was fucking Wardlow. He was Wardlow.
Yes.
He was ECW's Wardlow. Okay, so imagine, right? Kenny Omega's the TNT champ. Wardlow is the AEW champ. and we build to that. That's what Mike Awesome versus RVD was going to be back then. That was money. That was a bigger match than RVD versus Taz, in my opinion, which is a match that we had gotten. RVD versus Mike Awesome is something we had never seen before, and it would have been dope if RVD didn't get hurt.
And I think it would have. Again, like I said, hindsight's 2020. I get the build. I get the giant. I get the giant killer. To me, though, like RVD was still your main guy. You just lost Taz and the Dudleys. What did you have left? Sandman was in WCW, I think, at this point. Yeah, Sandman, like you had Rob Van Dam.
Everybody was in WCW. Raven had just come back. Right? It's like when they first got TNN, it was like Raven came back to lose the Dudleys. The Dudleys left, and Raven came back in the same night.
Right. So you had Tommy Dreamer and Raven doing tag team feuds. Who was your main guy? You had, if you look at it, the last part of the years of 99 and 2000 was Mike Awesome and Masato Tanaka. Where the fuck was RVD? Oh, yeah, TV champion. I get it. Like, the story is cool. Double champ, 2 years in, still hasn't lost, and wins the world title. I get the story, but dude, they waited too long. Again, at some point you could hurt yourself. Like you look at Kenny Omega winning the AEW world title. Like he won the belt, but look how banged up the guy was by then too. He had an epic title run, but it could have not happened. He could have gotten hurt, just like RVD did, and totally lost all momentum. But so I know we only got a few more minutes left. I want to ask you a couple of questions, and what do you have to say about this? So, all right, do you think if RVD became world champion for ECW sooner, do you think he would have left to go to WWF or WCW like the Dudleys, Sandman, Taz? Do you think he would have left before 2001?
RVD, he's a different kind of performer. He doesn't really get off on like. Oddly enough, he doesn't care about popularity, clout, prestige, or even money. RVD, again, I can't stress it enough, he was on my generation's Kenny Omega. He just wanted to push the art of wrestling. He just wanted to have the dopest matches that no one ever had before and do shit that no one had ever seen before and become a legend that way. And so I don't think he would have went to WWF because he wouldn't have been able to have the matches that he wanted to have. He went to WWF because ECW went under and he knew he wouldn't be able to have those matches in WCW.
Do you think that there was any chance Paul Heyman purposely kept him from the main title, because he didn't want WWF or WCW sniffing around? Because at that point, that'd be their main guy. If he's a proven draw and a proven commodity, do you think WWF and WCW would have come calling a lot quicker with a lot more money?
Probably. Like, the thing is, WWF has its head so far up its own ass. Like, even when they had RVD, they had no fucking clue what they had. Right? When they
this is fucking true.
When they actually got him, like, Vince didn't even know who the fuck he was until, like, he, like, couldn't ignore the signs. Right? Like, the fans,
right.
You looked out in the audience, and every sign was an RVD sign. Every fan was wearing an RVD shirt. Like, he was the most over thing, and it was like, dude, you can't deny it. Like, when people say that they stifled Matt Cardona when he was doing the fucking internet champion, yeah, he was getting good reactions, and people were chanting, "We want Zach" during, Roman's matches. But
during
it was
The Rock cutting a promo, they were chanting, "We want Ryder."
Yeah, but he was not on the level that RVD was.
No, absolutely not.
Like, if you weren't there in 2002, 2003, when RVD was being like, they just had him on openers with Jeff Hardy, and then when that happened, like, it was, you couldn't ignore RVD, and then finally, they eventually did put the belt on him. So that's the thing, is like, RVD, he was a superstar. He was a wrestler that's like once in a generation. I don't think he would have left. I think he would have stayed in ECW. I think Paul Heyman holding him back was stupid. But even when he, like, WWF and WCW would have been sniffing around. They would have went and tried to get him. I don't think he would have left. And they wouldn't have thrown the money at him. If Paul Heyman would have put that belt on him and made him the star, WWF wouldn't have thrown money at, like, they wouldn't have thrown enough money at RVD. Because they had been throwing money at him, and he did go work for them when ECW went over. But, like, RVD wasn't drawn by that, man. He just wasn't, and I don't think people understand. RVD was driven by a higher call. He wanted to have the dopest matches of all time, and in my opinion,
And
as someone
smoke a
who
lot of
watched
dope.
them, right? But like in my opinion, having seen those matches when they happened, like yeah, dude, he had the dopest matches of all time. Like
Yeah.
RVD versus Jerry Lynn is up there with Kenny Omega and Okada. RVD versus
Absolutely.
Sabu is up there with CM Punk versus John Cena. Like,
Absolutely.
he was our fucking work rate guy, and WWF wouldn't have recognized that. They would have tried to go after him. They probably would have lowballed him, but RVD wasn't Taz. Okay, Taz got lowballed and got a fucked up ass deal, and they fucking jobbed him out to Spike Dudley on fucking Heat for the rest of his career, right? But they wouldn't have been able to do that with RVD. First of all, he wouldn't have taken that kind of contract that Taz did. Taz knew he was a used up commodity, man. He was on the end of his contract. Taz was trying to cash out before he was too crippled to go. And look what he did. He got into WWF and quickly went to commentary, right?
Yeah, like 3 years in, yeah.
Yeah, RVD wasn't going to do that. RVD wasn't a broken man. He knew that he still had bangers left in him. And so he would
he absolutely did.
Yeah, he was going to negotiate more money, and WWF was not going to give it to him because they still looked at ECW as a fucking bingo hall fucking, look at all the guys that they got from ECW. They fucking didn't do shit with fucking Just Incredible, Raven, Rhino. The only ones they really did shit with were RVD and the Dudleys.
That was it.
That was it.
But again, talent always weighed out. RVD was better than every single person you mentioned.
Yeah,
every single person. I think had he gone. So my last question to you: do you think his career would have wound up any differently if he left ECW in say 97, 98, 99, 2000? Do you think had he gone to WWF before ECW folded, do you think he would have had a different career, or do you think he needed to complete ECW before going?
Nah, if he went at his height, if he would have left and went to WWF, they wouldn't have used him properly. And like at that time, everything was about Stone Cold, Mick Foley, The Rock, and Undertaker.
This is true.
He would not like RVD. Like he needs to get in the ring and sell you on him.
But you know what? I think he would have fit in a lot well with. I think he would have fit in very well with those Attitude Era guys, especially in the 98, 99. But he would have absolutely been, Intercontinental Champion and all that.
They had work rate guys on their roster at that time. Like they had fucking X-Pac, who was basically he was basically the WWE version of RVD. They had the Hardy Boys, they had Edge and Christian. They had RVD style guys that they just kept on the undercard because, like, dude, at that time, nobody is going to get into that main event unless you're Stone Cold, The Rock, or Mick Foley, or The Undertaker. Like, at that time, those four guys, like, dude, are you taking The Undertaker off of, are you telling me that you're not doing Undertaker versus Mick Foley so that way RVD can get the 20 minutes he needs to get over? Because RVD is not getting over in a 4-minute match, all right? They give him 15 minutes. 10 minutes of that is entrances of RVD. 5 minutes for your entrance. 5 minutes for your entrance. You got 4 minutes. Bam, that's your segment. RVD is not getting over in 4 minutes. He needs 20 minutes to get over because that's the art he creates, right?
Right.
And you're not going.
Kenny Omega's the same way.
They're not giving RVD 20 minutes to get over when they're trying to build to a Mick Foley spot or a Stone Cold spot. He would have been lost in the shuffle, even though he's a once in a lifetime talent. He would have got lost in the shuffle in WWE. I think at his peak, his best bet would have been to go to WCW and take the Eddie Guerrero, Chris Jericho route. He would have gone to WCW. They'd have fucked him around in the cruiserweight division, but he would have had his talents on the national stage, right? Because Jim Ross is the one that made those decisions in WWE. Jim Ross is the reason why Eddie Guerrero, Chris Jericho, and Chris Benoit even got a fucking chance and got any TV time and got those 20-minute matches, was because Jim Ross saw what Chris Jericho, Benoit, and Guerrero could do with 20 minutes on WCW. So RVD going in there, he would have put on 20-minute bangers in the cruiserweight division just to fill time because WCW just needed something to fill time before Hogan and the NWO came out, right? RVD would have stolen the show. He would have been underused. He would have left frustrated, gone to WWF, and Jim Ross, now having seen what he could do, would have been in Vince's ear and got RVD that fucking TV time he needed. Because the time when RVD actually went to WWE, who was going to bat for him? Fucking Paul Heyman. Everybody fucking hates Paul Heyman. But if he would have got that exposure in WCW, Jim Ross would have went to bat for him, because Jim Ross, he went to bat for RVD when RVD went to WWE. Jim Ross was the one like, holy shit, this guy's on our roster? How come I did not know who this guy was? So to me, that would have been the play there. And this is hindsight, right? And it wouldn't have been fun having RVD get fucking jobbed out to fucking Billy Kidman on Nitro, right? That wouldn't have been fun, but that would have got RVD motivated to go to WWF. And that's when he would have taken the world by storm, because look what happened with Chris Jericho, Benoit, Eddie Guerrero. When they jumped ship, they were the biggest stars in the world, because they had the talent and they showed it on WCW enough to get the back office to pay attention, because Jim Ross ain't watching no goddamn ECW, and he was head of talent relations at the time.
That's a very interesting take, and I like it. I think that would have probably been the best bet for Rob, and he probably would have had a much larger career in WWF had that happened.
Because look at when he went to WWF, he got overshadowed by what? Booker T and DDP, right? As soon as he got to WWF, he was starting to build momentum. He had some cool matches with Edge and Jeff Hardy and Matt Hardy, and they're in the hardcore division, but then WCW got bought out. And like WWF was like, holy shit, we got Booker T and DDP. We've been trying to get those guys forever. And yeah, RVD took a backseat to Booker T during the initial invasion angle, but he was still front and center as like the face of ECW. They gave him more time than Tommy Dreamer, Taz, Sandman. You know, they brought in all these guys, and who did they really push? Dudley's and RVD, the guys that they had had for a couple of months before the invasion. Not long before the invasion, but they had been there, so they pushed them over Lance Storm. And yeah, like, I just think if RVD went to WWF straight out of ECW, he would have been kind of treated like every other ECW guy that went to WWF straight out, and they would have left and eventually gone to WCW. I mean, look at what they did with Shane Douglas.
Dean Douglas.
Right? So, yeah, I honestly, if I were to go back and rewrite history, that's what I would have done. I would add RVD, leave ECW at the height of his TV title run. He would have went into WCW with a lot of indie hype and hardcore hype, and he would have earned the rest of the fans. He would have earned the WCW faithful just being in the Cruiserweight division, having matches with Eddie Guerrero. Dude, think about that, man. We could have had a Cruiserweight division with Eddie Guerrero, Chris Jericho, fucking Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, and Rob Van Dam.
That would have been
And Rey Mysterio. And who? I didn't even count fucking the Luchadors. Ultimo Dragon. Holy shit, dude. Oh my God, I'm like creaming my pants thinking of RVD and WCW's Cruiserweight division. Right? Imagine if you just took ECW at that time and put it in the Cruiserweight. Just RVD, Sabu, Jerry Lynn, throw them in the Cruiserweight division with Jericho and Eddie Guerrero.
You mean Mr. JL?
Right, Mr. J. Well, Sabu was in the Cruiserweight division.
Sabu did wrestle a couple matches on Nitro. I remember he wrestled like Alex Wright.
Yeah, jobbing out to Disco Inferno and shit. But like RVD, dude, if RVD was in WCW's Cruiserweight division, that would have been the perfect timeline. And then imagine, okay, so, and then in 2000, Jericho, right, leaves WCW, signs with WWF, shows up on New Year's Eve, and has this big, huge ceremony and all that, and they really put everything behind Chris Jericho to make him a star. Imagine if that was RVD that they did that too. Coming off of a hot run in WCW, you know, in the undercard, held back, and then shows up, and, you know, the countdown wasn't to Chris Jericho, it was to Rob Van Dam. Like, RVD would have had the career Chris Jericho had he gone to WCW. I have no doubt that RVD would have been what Chris Jericho and Eddie Guerrero were, right? They would have been held back in WCW and then a slow burn, but eventually got to the promised land in WWF. And RVD was their contemporary, man. RVD was the champ around the time Eddie Guerrero was the main event with Chris Jericho.
Very interesting. Nice.
That's my theory. That's where
I like that theory, and I'd like to backpack on that one because I like that. I think that would have been a very interesting RVD career. So, you know, let's get back to the question that was at hand. I think we've answered it, but let's, you know, as a recap, was RVD held back in ECW?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Paul Heyman admits it. The evidence is clear looking at how over he was and what was going on in the wrestling business. I think that it is a tragedy that Paul Heyman never. I feel like Paul Heyman, he defeated himself. If he would have pulled the trigger on RVD sooner, he would have had the star that would have been able to compete with Stone Cold in the NWO. And because he didn't believe in himself and he didn't trust those around him, he was a shyster. And that was the downfall of Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman couldn't not be a shyster. And because he was so much of a fucking shyster scumbag, he couldn't see that there were people around him that actually cared that weren't scumbags.
I agree with you. I agree with you. ECW, I think, would have been far different had RVD gotten the world title and been the face of the company at the peak of his popularity in ECW. It would have been wildly different. I mean, there wasn't, you see stars that are like polarizing, like John Cena would get half the boos, Roman would get half booed, sometimes all booed. Rob never did that. He never had that problem. He was over every single time. He was popular.
Turn him heel. He was there.
Heel or babyface. He got cheered. Right? Everyone loves RVD and the Acclaimed. I think that could have changed things.
He was ECW Steve Austin. Like,
yeah.
If you think about the 90s and you think about the three big companies, WWF was Stone Cold, WCW was Crow Sting, and ECW was RVD. And I can sit there and confidently say in the 90s, RVD could have carried ECW the way Sting and Stone Cold carried their respective companies. And Paul Heyman just didn't allow it to happen until the very end. And I believe that them not pulling the trigger on RVD is what led to ECW falling apart.
You know what? I think it absolutely was one of the Jenga blocks pulled out from its foundation.
No, because RVD's
injury totally threw them off, but he was also held in that secondary tier position for 2 years prior, and man, what you could have done with him.
By the time they were going to actually do it, he got hurt. That's what I'm saying. Is if they would have walked into TNN with RVD as the champ.
Oh man!
If he was already the champ before they signed, right? Taz was the champ when they signed, and they had everything built around Taz. If they had everything built around RVD when they signed with TNN, different story. Entirely different story. They wouldn't have had to show a replay of RVD versus Jerry Lynn. They could have just had their world champ come out.
And face Jerry Lynn for real.
And say, this is what ECW is. They didn't do that.
That would have been dope. That would have been really cool.
But looks like we're out of time, man.
Out of time.
And so we're going to call it a show here. But, hey, what do you guys think, man? Do you think RVD was held back? Do you think things would have been different had they strapped the rocket ship to RVD, as we are on rocket ship eve today, the day before the moon landing with Neil Armstrong? So if they would have put the rocket ship to RVD, would he have hit the moon like Neil Armstrong? Let us know in the comments below. Right after you like, comment, subscribe, right?
Absolutely. Do that first.
And then head up the rest of our social medias. You go head up our Twitter and harass Ryan Stone and tell him that RVD was overrated and that Sabu is the truth and Chris Candido knows how to lace boots and all that shit. And
Come at me with those takes. Come at me. Come at me.
He wants all your bad wrestling takes, so send them his way. And that's it for this episode of Play Fighting.
Later, everybody.
Peace.